Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. June 14th, 2022, here from Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. I'm experimenting with times in the morning here, navigating the influx of visitors. Haven't quite figured it out. In a spontaneous sharing, so be it. Today's talk, relativity, perspective, and the great unknown. I was thinking this morning of, well, many of you don't know that I first came to Bali when I was thrown out of Burma as a Buddhist monk. And that first time was 1982, 40 years ago. And now Burma is essentially a dystopian nightmare. But within that nightmare, there are millions of people fighting for freedom. And so it's not really a nightmare in the bigger picture of rising to the radical, ethical, moral, spiritual courage, the revolutionary heart, to just stand up to tyranny, global tyranny, patriarchal tyranny, embedded historical, traumatic, existential tyranny, those invenerating forces that are embedded in this environment of the cosmos that surface like volcanoes that erupt, and the next thing you know, you're called upon to feel what you're made of, your conscience, your dignity, your courage, your fortitude, your determination to fight the good fight. And when I first entered Burma, it was difficult. I was challenged by a multiplicity. I'm very hesitant to use the word addiction, but I don't really have a better word for it at the moment. I was beleaguered by a disconnect. And I think many of you can realize that where we've lived, where we were born, where we grew up, intrinsically that's where our roots were, but there was such a disconnect. You know what I'm speaking about? No matter what I did, no matter how much I learned and adapted, I felt displaced, radically out of place, completely disconnected from the context of the competitive, strangulating, industrial, capitalistic, patriarchal, competitive onslaught of lies. And I still quiver from the experience of trying to find connection in an impossible environment to adapt to, for me. And so I turned to the most convenient things that assuage my biochemistry: substances, nicotine, sex, art, dance, music, masturbation, love, challenge, outrage, hurt, meditation, philosophy, poetry, theater, music, film, anything to get my fucking mind off the context of belonging to the industrial lie, the competitive patriarchal lie. I know I'm just speaking about the obvious, but it just outrages me to see how crazy the lie has gotten to this point. It's pathological, sociopathic. It's so malignant what's gone down and what's going down today. What's new, right? A global tyranny, a global war on freedom, a global war on the right to live in sovereignty, in liberty. Have a dream is being annihilated right now by the forces of the industrial global elitists. It's a war on human consciousness, on the environment, to state the obvious, but it's not so obvious. So many smart, cool, woke people, meditators, yoga teachers, blah, 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 are so impossible to talk to today because they are embedded in an indoctrination, a mind control that makes Orwell look like fucking kindergarten. Drunk the Kool-Aid, right? They are bona fide cultists, running dogs of insanity. Hello? You need high doses of truth serum called acid and whatever you need to do to come out of the hallucination of this adopted, coerced, manufactured lie. I'm going to get into this in my film. Raw War is being worked on every day here. I came to Bali to script this thing, and I'll be going back to the West to film it. Probably on the island of Maui, just for 30 days. 30 days before to prepare, but a deep immersion for 30 days. It's going to be my ultimate spoken word, existential, radical art jazz, to do what I can to reveal the conundrum of being human in this context in 2022, and what we can do to fight back like the people of Myanmar right now are fighting back against the world's #1 terrorists. The former general Ming Online, know his name, Ming Online, the Pol Pot of the world today. It's an outrage that world leaders allow the world leader Aung San Suu Kyi to be imprisoned under this terrorist, and 13,000 fellow sisters and brothers, prisoners of conscience. We're all prisoners of conscience in a way. I'm going to get into that. But when I first entered Burma back in 77, then as a monk in 79, I fled America. I felt like, wow, I did it. But Burma was a dictatorship, so be it. They had me in. I came into a monastery. I abided by the rules, but it was so difficult, so hard to decathex from the substance abuse and use. That I cried, I wept, I hurt, I picked up half-smoked cheroots, cigars laced with opium to survive. There was no sex, no masturbation, no conversation. You shaved your head, you donned the robe, you meditated 8 one-hour sittings a day, 6 one-hour walkings a day, 2 meals a day, no food after 12 noon. It was a chosen lifestyle, not just of survival. But I had done so many psychedelics, had come down so many times that I wanted to go up and stay up. And meditation was a fucking incredible vehicle to look at consciousness and to overcome the forces of, denigration, self-denigration. I finally understood on some modicum level, Alan, you have a choice in every given minute of your day to snap out of the trance of indoctrination, cultural outrage, and you can refine your interior environment if you so choose, as you did as an artist, as a lover, as a poet, as a philosopher, as a speaker. You can refine your mind. Meditation. So after 2 or 3 weeks of this horror of sitting and walking and thinking and feeling the mosquitoes and the food and the oil and the dogs and the cats and the birds and the scream, I was broken. I remember coming back to my room and sitting and weeping and crying. I wasn't a crier, but I was crying unbeknownst to me why, except that I hurt. And outside my room, I heard puppies growling and this and that. And I went out with a kind of angst, arrogant anger to why are you annoying me too? And I looked down with my flashlight at night, and there was, many dogs come to the monastery because that's where they're fed. And this mother dog, there she was, looking up at me with these deeply open-hearted, sad eyes and multiple puppies. And the puppies, when you look closer, their eyes were just sealed shut. They hadn't seen the light of God or day ever in their life. And there they were, clawing for that primordial nipple, and they were trying to outmaneuver each other's paws. They didn't know what they were maneuvering around. They had no idea of other life except instinctually. But their eyes were closed and they were growling. And right there in that moment, those first 3 weeks and those first 27 years of my life made sense. I've been growling with my eyes wide open, not realizing I'm looking for the primordial nipple to satisfy something I can't be satisfied by outside alone. These puppies were growling and angry and competitive and never knew what they were doing. Their eyes were closed. And I went, oh my God, my eyes are open, but they're completely shut. I'm not taking responsibility, Alan Clements, for my own primordial flow of what's known as destructive or kilesas. Kilesas, it's a beautiful Pali word. The eruptions of consciousness. Greed, anger, sorrow, shame. I dare even use the word lust, because when lust is cool, when you get what you want, but when it's gone, you really hurt from being out of balance, completely tipped over, a jar broken. And these kilesas, anger, shame, fear, denigration, worry, doubt, sleepiness, fatigue, confusion, they hurt. But when the eyes are open and you see them for what they are, Alan Clements, you're a monk now. Your name is Agasara. Study states of mind. Whew. Mindful, intelligent literacy. Study the alphabet of consciousness. This is the state of fear. Inhabit it with Dharma elegance. I'd never heard those words. Dharma elegance. The spiritual Dharma aesthetic of how you dignify the state by occupying it wisely. Co-occupation of a kilesa with intelligent, placed, mindful heartfulness. Wow, dignity, in short. That was so rad for me to finally come home. I began to shift from tears of longing and fear to the first time in my life, the joy of awe, the joy of a deeper felt self-dignity, relativity, perspective, and the great unknown, the intersection of that. And how beautiful that was to see and to feel the coming home process of what it felt like to dignify a state of mind with the grace of self-respect. For the most part, I don't want to denigrate myself. I didn't really have self-respect simply on the terms of being autonomous with my own inner being. And from that state of mind, do it again and do it again. And this monastery and the teachers there gave me the gift of being able to do it again and again and again. Dignify the kilesa with elegant spiritual aesthetic. How well do you occupy, the teachers would ask me, how well do you occupy the presence of your own being? The elegance of your own unadulterated natural being. And it was like, wow, a monastery is a place to occupy natural, aesthetic, elegant beingness, and to learn how to inhabit beautiful states of mind. I went to my teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw, after that first encounter with those puppies. Thank you, puppies, wherever you are in this great cosmos, for that teaching. Eyes wide open, even though they're closed? What's the truth? And I told Mahasi Sayadaw what had happened, and he said there was a woman who lived in Mandalay back in the day and not had seen the Bay of Bengal or the ocean. And she went to the Bay of Bengal off the coast of Rakhine State, he told me. True story. And there were these entrepreneurial types of pirates that wanted to make money off her naivete. And they took her out on their boats. And those of you who've been to the tropical seas off the coasts of Myanmar and Thailand and other places in South Asia, you'll see that the oceans are a spectacle of these sublime colors of blue and turquoise, and just so many gradations in the spectrum of these almost impossible to define colors. And the woman was awed by the ocean. I thought the ocean was one color. She had never seen picture books. There was no movies at the times, or social media, or television, or digital media. And she was awed, and these entrepreneurial pirates took advantage of her and said, listen, how about if we sell you some of these colored waters, Mahasi Sayadaw told me. Of course, I'm using my own interpretation of his own translated information. And so the pirates put the colored water, so to speak, in brown bottles, so she couldn't see that the colors now were no longer visible. She was blinded by the brown bottles. But she was entranced by her entrepreneurial greed, desire, and the purity of her desire to sell these magnificent colored waters to her fellow sisters and brothers in Mandalay. You know where I'm going with this. And she gets there and she sees, when she pours the water out, that she was duped. Where did the color go? Mahasi Sayadaw asked me. It was never there in the first place. Refraction, relativity, perspective, consciousness refracted through the colorization of states of mind. States of mind, cetasikas, are different than this vijnana ocean of consciousness. I use the word pure consciousness, not so much to symbolize the absence of kilesa, but the purity of mind. That you can see the state for what it is, and the state so-called evaporates within the ocean of consciousness, and all of a sudden you're occupying the pure knowingness of mind, the knowing of consciousness, the awareness and the consciousness and the state. Wow, discernment is arising, perspective, relativity, and the great unknown. I remember reading a book back in the day called, I think it's The Power of 10, if you will. And if you look at the book, it's a picture book. And in that picture book, you have different images of, if I'm not mistaken, a couple in the park having a picnic in Chicago. Beautiful couple in the park having a picnic in Chicago. And then you look page by page, and I think the book is about 40 pages. And the next page, The Power of 10, you see kind of a large black page with multiple little specks of light all over it. In the middle of it, there's an arrow that points to, there on this micro dot is infinite galaxies, and down deep in those infinite galaxies, there's the solar system, where there is Earth revolving around a sun star, within this infinite other sun stars and galaxies. And right there where that little arrow's pointing, there's a couple in the park in Chicago having a picnic, and they're happy at the prime of their 26-year-old life. And you infuse that couple with all the hope and grandeur and romance and eroticism and poetry and divorce and babies and jobs and fears and decay and death and disease and IVs and worms eating their body. Okay, you go into all the variations of the gradations of a human life on planet Earth, and you go, oh my God. And this is from some untold distance out in the cosmos. Page 1 of the book, The Power of 10, and you go, oh my God, perspective, relativity, and the great unknown. It's one thing to be out there in that Bay of Bengal with searching for watercolors that don't exist except as refractions of light. Or a meditator in a monastery looking at his mind coming down from the dis-ease of a Western capitalistic culture and studying states of mind and the relativity of a monastery and a dictatorship on planet Earth. In the 70s, now here we are in the 2022s at the precipice of what? Of sacred victory or tyranny and extinction? Relativity, perspective, and the great unknown, always before our eyes if we have the eyes beyond the puppies to see and open them. Primordial states of mind happening within the great flow of consciousness. The next page in The Power of 10. And you drop in and all of a sudden you see another page that's identical to the page 1, black with infinite specks, and it says, you see here in that one arrow in the middle of the page, that couple having a splendid day in the park in Chicago in their beautiful picnic with great white wine and blah, 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 blah. Not blah, 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 but they're having a great time. And there you are imagining their life, and that the caption reads, now, this is just one galaxy with infinite star clusters in it. And in the middle of it, there's that solar system going around a sun star called the Sun, 96 million miles or so away from that planet called Earth, in a relativity of heat that if it exceeds even a micro dash, it will bake everything like, charred fish. And the relativity of this heat system on a planet with that couple having a picnic in the park in Chicago, and you go, oh my God, wow, we're that much closer now, the power of 10 closer into that couple. Anyway, you know where I'm going with this. And eventually you're kind of exasperated and you finally get to about page 15 or 20, and all of a sudden you're entering the solar system and you see Saturn with those classic rings around it, and you go, God, I'm almost home. And there's that arrow, Earth, very small micro dot. And of course, there's Illinois and there's Chicago, and there's that couple. You don't see them, but that arrow points, that couple is still having that picnic in the park in Chicago. And now you're only, I don't know how many, millions of miles Saturn is from Earth. And eventually you get to about the moon, and you see the same arrow and that same couple, and you get closer till eventually on page 34 or 35, you're about like 100 meters. The power of 10 reduced that far down, 100 meters above the park in Chicago, and you can barely make an outline of the couple. You traveled a long way together. And there they are having a splendid time at the end of the day, about to go home from their picnic. And here we are spinning around a sun ball in an infinite, multidimensional, complete unknown with white holes and black holes and gargantuan asteroids and wars and genocides and 800 billion humans that have lived before you and me in 14,000 years of so-called recorded civilized history, with 80 different astrological projections coming out of human consciousness about the stars that we live in that we've never met. and languages and massacres, and look at all the babies and the children and the birds and the flowers and the tears, all the great oceans on this little planet called Earth, with the religions and the politics and those puppies back in Burma with their eyes closed, growling for the primordial nipple to nurture and to satisfy, to try to assuage the dilemma of a birth in the context of a life. What is this life, right? What is relativity? What is perspective? What are we here for? What really matters? What is this great unknown that we're embedded in beyond our own desire systems? So it seems. I did not ask to be born. Compelled by oxygen and biology to continue to wake, to interrelate, to perceive. Meditation was the fine inner art of stabilizing within this great, great, great momentum of breathing and living, and how hard it was to consciously interrupt the momentum, the neurotic, pathological momentum of do, acquire, do, the primordial nipple of more, less, more, less, avoid, have, avoid, navigate. Those of you who've meditated know how amazingly difficult it is to sit for 5 minutes and try to put your mindful attention on simply your breath entering your own body and leaving your body without manipulation. Try it. I mean, stating the obvious. Just sit there in any posture, wherever you are, and see if you can occupy the sensation of the breath entering the mind and the body and the lungs, and feel it. Feel it as if you're kissing your lover for the first and last time. Just feel it as if you're in hospice before your final breath. And how difficult it is to be intimate with one's own oxygen as it enters the body. And it's one thing to be aware of that which we are and feel, but to feel that oxygen provides life. It's not just to meditate, to be calm, but to me, it took a long time, coming to the end here, a long time of what am I doing? I'm watching my breath come and go. What does that teach you? Well, you could die at any moment. Oh my God. Or anything could interrupt the flow of your continuity to be in the safety that you are. Oh my God. You teach yourself through this deep experiential presence the most intimate, sacred lessons. Gratitude. The gratitude to be in cognitive luminosity simply with your breath, right? The best kept secret, our own self-love, our own self-respect, our own sense of worth, intrinsic, flawed with foibles, mistakes, and a history of struggle. Embrace, elevate, accept. Embrace, elevate, accept. Embrace, elevate, accept your heart with all of your mistakes, Alan Clements, with all of your foibles. You could and will die mid-sentence like every other life form at this very moment, living and dying. In breath. Oh my God. Isn't life about returning to the most intrinsic experience of the sacred? Could there be anything more important than simply embracing our life in the context of what we are as sacred? That divine feminine experience of a felt experiential oxygen of primordial peace. to call off the war, the violence, the separation that goes on with eyes wide closed. Or I should say eyes squeezed shut, and the illusion of thinking that they're open, but you cannot see rightly. And so you growl and you fight and you're competitive and you're denigrating and you do what you do and you think it's justified. You think it's right, Mr. Xi Jinping. You think it's right, Mr. Klaus Schwab. You think it's right, Mr. Biden, to kill in the name of your pathetic misinterpretation of love, of truth and democracy, you idiot. Those are mild expressions of sacred contempt for the violation of the human mind misbehaving in the context of a shared world. It'd be fine if it was just in the playpen of your own denial, in your own Oval Office called a prison camp with bars around it, and being put in there as a war criminal. Yeah, play it out there. Bang the walls with the head of your own denial. But you're in context as a leader, and we've got to live with the consequences of your eyes squeezed shut. Of course, the last page is you see that couple in the park in Chicago, relative, right? I'll close here. 1603, Sir Isaac Newton comes up with a thing called the prism. He brings his illustrious intellectual friends and philosophers and theologians and mathematicians into the room and says, I've got something for you, my friends. And they're all sitting there waiting to go home, to do what they do, to have that splendid picnic in the park in Chicago, or suck on the primordial nipple of their own denial and their own deception. Come on, Mr. Newton, what is it? You're taking us from our lives, right? And all of a sudden that prism refracts light. And he brings the Bay of Bengal into panoramic vision against the wall. And they go, oh my God, this man is the existential Houdini of all time. How did you do that, Sir Isaac Newton? I didn't, except it's refracted light that's natural. The spectrum, the rainbow was introduced through the prism to consciousness. Consciousness as prism. Meditation as the access to the spectrum of consciousness. Perspective, relativity, and the great unknown. No greater vocation that I can see than studying the intimate reality of the colors of consciousness and discerning each of them, so that we can begin to learn to live in the radiance of nuance and poetry, and the musicality of nuance and poetry, in the myth of the spectrum. Studying consciousness, the vocation of consciousness, coming home to that primordial, beautiful, trans-religious, post-spiritual life, the Dharma art of studying the relativity of perspective. I read Michio Kaku's book recently. I think it's called something God. Leave it at that. He's studying the mind and the behaviors of like the 14 greatest scientists and philosophers and astronomers that have lived in modern times. And within it, he's talking also about the relativity of planet Earth in relationship to other bodies in eternity and in infinity. And he's saying that we must understand, if we're going to preserve life as best as we can that extinction is baked into physics. You cannot outrun extinction, discontinuity, death. Even our blessed sun star, there will come a time in mystical, cosmological time, which is just a second away. It will engulf our home called Earth. There'll be no winners or losers then. There'll be only an astrophysical vacancy, a silence. That is just a few seconds away, a billion years or so. That is nothing in cosmological time. He's telling viewers and audiences and readers in his book. Gulp, relativity, perspective, and the great unknown. Make haste while you're healthy. I hear it in the monastery. It's just a relative perspective in the continuity of a human life that you can be clear-minded, of health. And even children of any age, anything could happen, and it does. Relativity, perspective, and the great unknown. What will you do with the sacredness of a full breath today, throughout your day? Return to the innocence of that level of sacred recognition, right? Let's get holy together. Let's get passionate. Let's get so intimate together that love is a wonderment carnival. Theater, dance, music, art. Take the labor out of work. Take the violence out of politics. Take the discrimination out of religion. Study the spectrum of consciousness so that we co-evolve from this great radiance of mind. Anything that promotes desecration, violence, domination, discrimination, xenophobia, apartheid, totalitarianism, tyranny, dictatorship, toxic patriarchy. Our vocations are spiritual savants. We are all celestial creatures, breathing, emoting, bleeding, oozing, dying to radiate our wisdom in this great awakening, the great awakening. So thank you for being in my life. Thank you for participating in this kind of poetic, musical rant. I'm back. I'll try to figure out the right time here, but meanwhile, from my heart to yours, have a beautiful day and keep on keeping your dignity right in your organic soul, active, alive. Nurture the best of you and just leave the rest behind. Push it away and just walk on in your glory, in your dignity, in your passion. Recommit to a holy life. Push away the toxic shame and all the various ways in which the establishment wants you to hold their toxic negativity. Enough, you idiots. We don't buy it. We don't want you. You're not an expert. You're not science. You're not a professional. You're just a fraud. You're just a small fucking little mind. And we don't even want to waste our breath on stating the obvious. We are the masses. We are the people. Let's belong in unity to something beautiful together. So that's my cry today. That's my wish. And from my heart to yours, have a beautiful day. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.